People of the internet, welcome to Atheist Edge. Today I am joined by my esteemed guest, S.J. Thomason. S.J., how are you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing well. Thank you.
So can you tell people briefly where they can find you? Let me just be clear. They can find you at the link in the description below. If you are curious about what S.J. is all about, that's there. But S.J., could you tell them what they'll find at that link?
Oh, sure. So I am S.J. Thomason. I have a channel also called S.J. Thomason. You can also find me on Twitter at _023. And I like to do Christian stuff. And so my channel is all about Christianity and religion. And every once in a while, I'll throw a little politics in, but I try to steer clear of that because that tends to get people pretty hostile, even though I'm not steering clear of it this weekend. And I'm going to be doing a video on communism and that. So that's pretty much it.
Oh man, I should have waited to have this conversation after you did that then, because I think people are a little tired of the atheist thing, but whatever. That's fine. That's good. Great. So today wanted to talk to you about the video that you did on Atheist Value Propositions. Can you just tell me, can you briefly just describe what that video was all about?
Sure. So I looked at, I'm a business professor. So what I teach is business management and leadership and ethics and stuff like that. And so what I like to talk about is value propositions. And so value propositions are just good reasons to support something. And so I thought with atheism, what does atheism have to offer? And I've heard people like Richard Dawkins say it has nothing to offer. There's no rhyme or reason to it. There's no justice. There's no purpose. There's nothing like that. And so I thought to myself, now, why would anyone want to be an atheist if there isn't some sort of value to it? But then I had some atheists on Twitter say that there is value to being an atheist. They said the value is the fact that they can live their lives as they want. They can spend their Sunday mornings doing whatever they want. And at the end of the day, to them, it really doesn't matter. They don't believe in the afterlife. They don't believe in any sort of meaning, morality that's ultimate, meaning God-driven or purpose-driven from God. They don't believe in anything like that. And so I thought it seems kind of sad to be an atheist because there's so much hope and so much other good stuff in Christianity. And so I was in the video, I make a case for why you should not be an atheist on one side, and then why you should support Christianity as the way, the truth, and the life on the other side.
Okay, great. So I was wondering if the value propositions that you were talking about was a business-oriented type of concept, because when I was trying to do research, I was trying to find examples of other value propositions from anybody else that I could compare and contrast whatever atheism might have, or Christianity for that matter. But I couldn't find anything that wasn't about business. And I was like, I kept on, adding philosophy or whatever, trying to get it honed in. I even looked at the Stanford Encyclopedia for a little bit and just try to figure out how could I give you a value proposition from atheism. But I think that what we're really talking about here is just why be an atheist, right? And I think that the question of that just boils down to whether or not there is or is not a God. Because if there is a God, obviously there's no point in being an atheist. But if there isn't, then everybody should be an atheist, right?
Technically, yeah. If you believe there's no God, and actually that's a great thing, because what is your definition of atheism? Does it mean that you believe there's no God, or does it mean you lack a belief in God? Because I've had atheists have different definitions.
At basis, fundamentally, I think atheism is the lack of belief, but I think that the positive assertion that there is no belief is, a further extension of atheism. That it's just it's a spectrum of ideas that come around that, But yeah, basically, I think that it is the lack of belief of God. I don't think I'll add anything else to that. If you wanted to push back on that, that's great.
So, well, actually, I want to ask you, just out of curiosity, have you always been an atheist? I'm assuming you're an atheist because you're called Atheist Edge. And so have you always been an atheist, or were you maybe raised in a different faith and then came to atheism? I'm just curious. I really don't know much about you.
Sure. I was actually born into the Jehovah's Witnesses. And then around 10 years old, when my parents got divorced, my mother switched to Southern Baptist, and we adopted that faith until I was, there's no date, no age. When I dropped the Southern Baptist type thing and became what I called a non-denominational Christian, where I just didn't have a particular dogma, and then deployed to Iraq. came back, went to college at a Baptist university, and then became an atheist completely. So that's
Wow.
me in a nutshell.
So you went to a Baptist university. I had a friend who used to be a dean over at Houston Baptist University, but now I guess it's Houston Christian University. But it was a deal where when you went there, you sort of had to adopt certain beliefs. So you were, while you were at the university, you were still a Christian, but then you left that faith after you graduated. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I was in the transition period. I wouldn't call myself a Christian. Definitely not like a true Christian, like I was younger. But I was still trying to hold on to that belief. I was still trying to maintain that. But the things that I learned were they meshed well with what I was hearing from other atheists online, and it didn't contradict like I thought it would. So I eventually became an atheist because of that. I think. I think that I like to say is that the biggest nail in the coffin was the deployment. That was the thing that really got me doubting, and then the final nail is graduating.
Now you're the fourth person, and actually, let me say this: there's more online. Actually, I can think now. There are probably 5 people, 2 people online, and 3 people in real life who I know who were deployed. And I want to say thank you so much for your service, because it's incredibly brave. I could never do it. I look at people who are able to just run into gunfire like that, rescue other people, and I can't imagine that kind of selflessness. So it's truly amazing. So thank you so much for that. But I just found out my neighbor I've known this neighbor since I moved in this house years and years ago. And so I just found out the other day that he's an atheist. He just sort of made the announcement to me out of the blue. Kind of. And he also was in the military. And then one of my students, the strangest thing was on the very first day of class, one of my students who was in the military also told me in the very first day of class, and again, I don't offer my beliefs in class. I teach at a secular university. And he said, oh, by the way, I'm an atheist. And so I thought, oh, okay. And then my husband's uncle, who unfortunately died prematurely in a boating accident, but he also served in the military. Oh. And he also was an atheist. So is there something about seeing because I'm the only reason I'm putting them all together, and I'm wondering, is it because you see such unfortunate traumas and horrors and terrible things around the world, like war is hell, they say, and is it maybe something like that where you say, is this a God driven planet, or is this a God ordained existence when you see the tragedies that you've seen?
Yeah, most definitely. I would say that it really shakes you. When you're American, and especially when I was very young, we were middle class. We weren't poor until my parents got divorced. So when I was very young, we lived a kind of privileged life. And that contrast to what you see there in all around the world, not even just the people that are victims of, a bombing or a shooting or whatever, but actually just, the general conditions. And you get this sense that your opinions, your whole feeling about your life, your blessing, so to speak, they're just a point of privilege that you have that you can't extrapolate to everybody else, because clearly there are some people so tragically disadvantaged and unprivileged that you can see right there in front of you. It's jarring. It will change your perspective entirely, I think. But there are people that will retreat to their faith when they are faced with that. They can't. I won't even say that. That's too harsh. Yeah, they just return to their faith when they see horrible things. I'm just going to leave it at that.
Yeah. And so it's interesting, because I've also looked into studies. I looked into the Globe study, and what I found very interesting is they measured people's perceptions of humane orientation, what they thought was going on in their country and what they thought should be going on with humane orientation, meaning the idea of being kind to both the in groups and the out groups, and treating the planet well, and treating life forms well, like other little animals well. And it's interesting because the highest levels of humane orientation in the world happen to be the poorest places in the world in many cases. Like, for example, much of Africa has very high levels of humane orientation, and Ireland does too. Ireland's had a history of some suffering. So some of the places where you see some of the most suffering had these really high levels. And then the places with some of the least suffering, like West Germany, East Germany, those were at the very lowest of humane orientation, which I found fascinating. And so, and then I thought to myself, now what connects a lot of these European countries that have low levels of humane orientation, relatively speaking? And they have a lot of social safety nets. The churches are closing. And when the government's giving you handouts and you don't need the church to help you out, unfortunately, some people who are extrinsic religiosity believers, might fly away. And so you have the that type of thing. So I think that to me shows, I mean, probably with the lens that I have on, the rose-colored glasses, everything I see, I try to explain in my own life, or just try to explain what I see outside. And a lot of it comes through my God lens and saying, yes, I can see that what God would do that. And so that's kind of the strange alternative way to look at that.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. You know, it's like the news that we hear about today, every day, it's so divorced from our everyday reality. Most of us never have to experience these horrible tragedies of people coming into your home, doing horrible things to your children and your family, and ending the lives of people right in front of you. So most of us never have to experience that. And once you do, especially when that's not your norm, I think that's more shattering for you. But when it comes to living your life that way entirely, these things are just esoteric ideas in the ether. They're not really in your face. You might watch a movie and have some kind of empathy for the characters there, but it's not real until you see it right there in front of you. And when there's a baby, burnt up, covered in burns, or the first evacuation I did was an 8-year-old boy who had some shrapnel. He died right there under me while I was doing CPR. Like, these kind of things, it breaks you when it comes to this faith idea that there's a God, because you have this idea of God and what he would and wouldn't do, right? And you think, well, God certainly could protect the kids. Certainly he's going to do this, he's going to do that, right? And when you see that he's not going to do that, that's just mind altering.
That's so if that, and that kind of brings to a question, if one of the things about atheism is there's no ultimate justice. So at the end of the day, you die. The guy who did that to that little 8-year-old boy is going to die one day, and he won't be judged according to atheism. There's no, in Stalin, all the horrible stuff that he did to his people, and at the end of the day, he's shaking his fist at the very end, according to his daughter, at God. And if there is no God, then there's no justice. And so do you see that? I mean, do you see that there should be, in a system that we have where everyone seems to feel a sense of justice and a sense of truth and morality, and a sense we know we have to be benevolent. We've got a lot of that stuff throughout the world. Other studies have shown that those moral values are something consistent all over the world, in 7 major world religions, even in humanism, atheism, American atheists, and the United Nations. We all have this sense of a need for justice and truth. And so wouldn't that sort of infer, if all cultures have that there is a divine lawgiver who sort of instills these moral senses within us?
Do you want to focus on the judgment or the morality part?
Oh, I guess, all right. So do you believe that you have judgment? Do you believe there will,
Okay.
You don't believe that there will be a judge at the end for people like that?
No, I don't.
Or do you believe, because you said something about cosmic space, do you believe maybe some sort of a universe judgment or anything like that? Or
no, I don't believe in any kind of, I think that I use the term karma in a very loose sense, right? I understand that the concept actually just means that you are a product of your actions. And so I think that is a kind of justice that is real, but it's not like a force. It's just the probabilities of your actions having an effect on the probabilities of other people's actions. If I treat people in general badly, the probability that they're going to help me in a bad time goes way down. The probability that they're trying to hurt me goes way up. So I create a bad situation for myself in that way. But I don't think that there's any kind of absolute judgment. And I think that when it comes to Christianity, for example, there's this huge loophole in the judgment that is highly unsatisfactory to me. The fact that anybody like Jeffrey Dahmer, for example, can take can repent of their sins, and God will forgive them because he's infinitely merciful. So there's no judgment there. There's no actual justice. It's just a forgiveness. The actual, there's no justice there. I can't see any justice when it comes to being able to forgive anything at just a repentance. I think there has to be penance, some kind of action. I know that I've done bad things to other people in my life that I owe a debt to, and they have every right to come and collect it from me. And at that point, I need to pay up.
I think you're making a really good point, and it's a point I've heard before, and I was never able to answer that point very well when I was a Southern Baptist. And so I am able to answer it now that I've reverted, I should say, back to my original Catholicism, because Catholicism offers an answer for that. And it's a lot
Purgatory.
different than what the Baptists say. Yeah, it's purgatory. And so we all have this eternal destination. And there are three choices that you make. You're either, like Jesus said, you're either for him or against him. Now, you could be for him, where at the very end of your life, you suddenly for him, or you could be just always against him for your whole life. Now, then he lets you go into the existence that you want to be without him. And that's not the existence that I would think anyone would want. But some people do. They just choose not to be with him. But then the Catholic suggestion is that there's purgatory, meaning that you will pay the price for what you've done. And it could be all the way up until the very final judgment that you're in this purgatory state. And so that's how that's answered. And the only people really in heaven are those who've made their way out of purgatory if they were not repentant, or they had some sins left over to repent or to work on, to do something about, to pray for, whatever it is. And then they go to heaven, and that's where all the saints are. And so there's a lot of neat stuff in the Catholic faith, not to try to sell the Catholic faith, but I'm trying to write a book called The Catholic Value Propositions. So I'm back to my value propositions, but Catholicism has a lot of answers for those really hard questions that the Baptists were never able to answer satisfactorily for me.
No, I understand what you're saying. And certainly purgatory is a much more attractive option than eternal damnation automatically, just straight down the middle. So, coming from my background, being a Jehovah's Witness, we didn't have purgatory or hell. People who were, sinners, the unrepentant sinners, and non-believers and such, they would just be dead. Actually, everybody would just be dead. It was more of the Jewish kind of afterlife, where people just go to the Sheol grave, and at the resurrection, the end time, when that comes and all the prophecies are fulfilled, then everybody who is dead is resurrected. That is supposed to be resurrected. You come back to life on earth, and you live a human life forever, like Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden were supposed to. And the damned, let's say, they just don't exist anymore. And then the devil himself is thrown into the lake of fire. So I got that theology, and then we've got the Southern Baptist theology, where of course there's hellfire and damnation, standard American mainstream theology. And then you've got what you're proposing, which is Catholic, that's more global mainstream theology, right? Where most of the world believes that, and that's certainly more attractive. But when we look at the text of the Bible, how can we exclude which one is which? And before that even begins, of course, there's the question of whether or not we should trust what the Bible says. So that compounds the issue entirely, because I don't even have the trust for the Bible to care which version of hell is correct. But then once I do, I don't have a way of telling which one. Jehovah's Witnesses have great arguments, and I don't know if you've ever talked to one before, but good luck. I'm just saying. And then
there's one I interact with on Twitter. Her name's
really?
Sally.
Right.
Yeah,
You should definitely bring them on. I'd love to see that conversation. I'd love to host a debate between you and a Jehovah's Witness, or anybody else.
Yeah, I'm to be honest, I have not dug deeply into Jehovah's Witness faith, so I don't really know exactly what they believe. So it's good to hear from your perspective, since you were raised that way for many years. 10 years, I think you said.
They'll get you. You be careful. You keep that Bible handy.
Well, that's actually that's the other thing that's interesting is just like what you said. See, one of the arguments, I came back to Catholicism for a number of reasons, and one of them was when I realized that, of course, the Catholics handed down the Bible. The Catholics brought in the sacraments. They brought in all of these different understandings. Their Bible has 73 books. The Protestants only has 66. Martin Luther didn't like certain books of the Bible, and so he decided to sort of segregate them. And then other Protestants later on removed these books that are still in the Greek Orthodox Church and still in Catholicism. And so those books do explain purgatory better. Martin Luther didn't like the purgatory, so he pulled out Maccabees and separated it, I should say. He didn't quite pull it out, but others later did. But the other thing about the Catholics is they've had priests through the centuries and councils that have explained all of these different church doctrines, and saints who sometimes say that they're having visions and God is telling them, explaining to them some of these things. So I feel like some of the the beliefs of the Catholic system come from 2,000 years of hard work, not just 500 years of we're going to take your Bible and leave everything else on the table, like the sacraments and all the other things that you've done. So I feel like there's good reason to look into it. I'm not going to do a sales pitch because I know we came in to talk about the atheist value proposition. And so,
Yeah.
So let me just ask you this. If, and I always wonder this because this kind of tells me exactly where you're standing. If you one day found out without a doubt, there's absolutely no doubt Jesus appeared in front of you, you could physically see him. He did something that you could tell he was absolutely divine. And he held his hand out to you to bring you onto the ship, if you want to call it that, or to bring you into heaven. What would you do? Would you accept his offer, or would you sort of walk away?
So am I the only person who can see this in this hypothetical?
Oh, no, let's just say you're surrounded by all kinds of other people who can also see it, and everyone is there and everyone's witnessing. And so everybody's saying, and he's offering it to all of you, and it's your family, it's your friends, it's all of these people you trust very much.
And this divine thing that he does in this example, is it durable? Does it continue on, or is it just like a flash in the pan?
No, it's continues. Like he sticks around with you for a long time. Maybe he hangs out with you for the whole day, talks about all the questions that you have, and goes through that kind of stuff. And then at the end of the day, would you consider following him?
I'd consider it for sure. I would be considering it from the moment that I see it, right? If I'm seeing something that other people can also see, that's great evidence to me that that's probably a real thing. If the thing that thing does is durable and can be shown to other people, like, turning water into wine. Look, this wine, where's the grapes it came from? You don't know, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that's a lot of evidence for me. If it's my current understanding of the Bible as it stands now, that he explains to me back to me, then no, I'm not going to follow him. I'm going to say you're an evil God and get out of my face. But if he explains to me some alternate interpretation of all these scriptures that makes it all make sense to me all of a sudden, equalizes the immorality that I see, then sure, I'll be all on board.
I think that's good. That's very fair, very, very good, honest answer. You say, hey, you explain it to me and it makes sense to me. I like that answer.
Thank you. I appreciate it. But as far as the atheist value proposition, because I know that's what we came to talk about this way, I want to first of all just say that I agree with Richard Dawkins and anybody else who would say that atheism in and of itself has no value proposition. There's no intrinsic value to atheism. If everybody else in the world were atheist, there'd be no value to it whatsoever. It'd be just a neutral thing. If we're talking about comparing it to theism, there are some negatives and some positives. Obviously, science has shown that having religious faiths and community is great for your health and great for your longevity. So that's a good thing. But atheism doesn't have that. But on the other hand, atheism seems, in my opinion, to have a more clear picture of the truth. Not necessarily it has a picture of the truth, but it allows you to see a greater picture of the truth, like, evolutionary science, cosmic, cosmological science, all those other things. So in those things, we can build community and we can eventually gain for ourselves the advantages of theism. But because we are so far behind, because theism has ruled the planet for so long, I don't see that happening anytime soon. I think that's going to take a lot of work to build up a community that's as powerful for your health as, for instance, Christianity.
Yeah, no, that's true. Christianity is offered. I mean, there's a book by Tom Holland that's a really good book called The Dominion, and he's not even a Christian. He's more of an agnostic, although now he says he identifies as a cultural Christian. But he's an agnostic who wrote this book and investigated all of the things that Christianity brought to the world. And some of this stuff was just like in the olden days, a couple thousand years ago, if you were sick, you were considered cursed by God. And then Jesus got up there and said, well, blessed are the sick, blessed are those who are suffering, all that kind of stuff. He said, if you were healthy and you were doing well, you were very strong, then God has been giving you blessings. If you're wealthy, God is blessing you. And he did the opposite, kind of flipped everything around, and it changed people's perspectives about helping the poor. And then through the years, you've seen hospitals and schools and all that kind of stuff that they've contributed that I think is pretty useful, just like you're saying. For atheism, well, let me ask you this. Do you think the society would be, if United States, since you and I are both in the United States, do you think US society would be better if we were, right now we're 70% Christians, if we were 70% atheists? Do you think that would be a better society?
Okay, so this is complicated. There's this, I have in my head this logarithmic type chart that shows how the value and the utility of these ideas go through time. So I see that Christianity has this kind of upscale line and then kind of teeters off. I think that atheism would have this much lower line, much further out, and then go up much higher. Does that make sense? I think that atheism, or the widespread adoption of atheism, I should say, would have a much greater effect for the well-being of all people over a long time scale. But if we were to just switch instantly right now, everybody just became atheist for no reason, I don't see how that would work out too well.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting way to look at it. So yeah, no, I don't think it would work out very well at all. I actually think Christianity is one of the strengths of the United States society, and the fact that we're one of the few Western countries that's adhering to it as strongly as we are when we compare ourselves to, say, Australia or Canada or a lot of those European countries, especially the Western European countries and Northern European countries. They tend to be moving to bigger and bigger portions of them are atheist. And then, of course, you've got all of the communist countries or formerly communist countries that a lot of people in those countries were raised to study, communism and Marxism and Marx's ideas on religion and atheism and all that kind of stuff. And so you've got a lot of atheists coming out of those places. And sometimes in Europe, some people would argue that, hey, it looks like a good deal in Europe, but then you go into some of the communist countries, and of course, it's a very bad deal in some of those places because of that political system. And so I think when the one thing about Christianity is when you think you have an ultimate judge so you're not going to do something sneaky in the dark that you get away with. You're going to get caught at one point. I think that might be a good thing for society to have. And that's why some have argued that's where religion came from. I don't agree with that, but some have actually made that argument.
Well, I mean, that's one way to look at it. But I think that when a person feels that the judge can be infinitely merciful towards them, that gives them an out to do whatever they want.
That could. Well, that could. That's why.
That's
why I think Purgatory is such a good. Yeah.
Let me just be upfront and honest. That's kind of how I behaved as a Christian. When I truly believed that God was real, I was banking on His mercy. Like, it was just because it's everything in the dogma and the theology. It's all about the mercy. They really push it on you, and I was really buying into it. And I think that it allowed me to do some really bad things and justify them in a twisted and convoluted kind of way.
Do you have siblings who are also atheists or Christians, or?
No, I'm the only person in my family who's an atheist.
Okay, but do you have siblings too? Because you said before your mom is a Southern Baptist. Is she still a Southern Baptist, or is she? I
think she might call herself non-denominational at this point, like I did. But my brother is so I don't know what you would call him. He believes in the flat Earth. He believes in Alex Jones type conspiracies.
Oh,
He's
wow.
just all the way down that rabbit hole. And then my sister is, I think, some kind of Baptist, and my little brother Daniel, I don't know what he thinks.
That's funny. I've got a little brother with the same name, and I don't really know what he thinks either.
Right, the youngest, they suffer. Honestly, I feel bad for him.
Yeah, so that's interesting. You've got the one brother who's a flat earther. Have you had him on your channel to flesh out his views?
No, I'm not doing that. No, not my brother. I love him, but no.
No, it's funny. It's funny because I tried to get, my sister's a Catholic, and my two brothers are kind of agnostic, and their wives are kind of agnostic too. And so they've got that little pack in my family. And my dad's kind of agnostic, although he believes in God, but he's kind of, he doesn't go to church. He doesn't identify with anything that's Christian. He's got Jesus crosses hanging in his house, but I think that's because my mom had hung those up when she was still here. But the reason I'm saying that is because it's funny, because I tried to get my sister to come on my channel. She won't do it. I don't want my brothers to come on my channel.
I know exactly what that feels.
Because
Yeah.
my one brother, he chases me around at Christmas time. This is what he does. He comes home from Germany. He's got his wife sitting next to him, and he purposely likes to push my buttons, and it's like just like when we were little kids. So he comes up to me and hey, Heather and I are atheists, ha ha ha, and she's like, I am not an atheist. And he's like, shh, come on. He's like trying to,
Yeah.
he's trying to get me going.
So you don't have any atheists in your family, right?
Not atheist. I'm more agnostic, kind of wishy-washy, maybe weak Christians.
Okay. Do you find that you have conversations with them often about it?
With my brother, my brother from Germany, absolutely. Yeah, every time he comes home from Germany, he wants to talk about it. So
he wants to talk about it. Interesting.
Yeah, and I don't bring it up because he'll follow me around the house and ask me all kinds of questions, and I'll answer any questions that he has. But he blocked me on Twitter because he didn't want to see my Twitter account. So I have no idea. I don't really know what he's and so I mentioned going to church and I mentioned stuff to him, and he's just not into any of that. And then he's teaching his son that God doesn't exist, and his son has not been baptized, and my other brother's 2 kids have not been baptized, and so I got projects. That's all. I've got projects.
I did not teach my children that God did not exist. I told them that I don't believe that God exists, and I told them that there are lots of people who do. Almost pretty much everybody. That's how I said it to them anyways. And I didn't push it either way, but they did come to the conclusion, at least currently, that there isn't a God. They don't believe in any of that supernatural stuff. And I don't blame them. Obviously, if they were seeing ghosts or something like that, then maybe it'll be a different story. But yeah, so atheism doesn't really have a value proposition. The value of atheism is a clearer picture of reality from which we might be able to build community and assets to actually make our lives better. And I think that ultimately would be the clearer picture of the goodness that atheism can give us.
Yeah, see, I think that Christianity explains the clearer picture of reality. To me, Jesus, and not just to me, but obviously Jesus says it himself. He's the way, the truth, and the life. He's the truth, and following him gives us a better understanding of why the world is ordered the way it is, and why there is tremendous suffering in the world, because we don't believe that this is a final destination. We believe that this is a stepping stone to our final destination, and that the final destination is infinite. And so this is just like a sand on the beach of heaven. And so a lot of the torture, the terrible stuff that people go through, and the way that it is, and conversely, a lot of the joy that people experience, and the happiness and the love, I think it all comes together to kind of help us build our character in this world so that we're better to be with God in the next world. And so that's basically where I stand on that.
So I think it's interesting that the focus really is on the eternal life, don't you think?
Mm-hmm.
I think that, like, for instance, if Christianity didn't offer that, if it only offered heaven for 1,000 years or something like that, and then annihilation, would you think that it would be so powerful?
No, I don't. I think the power is this eternal idea.
Right.
And so,
and I think I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
So I've been looking into transhumanism more deeply because of the debate that I have upcoming on another channel. And it's very much in line with what I have in my personal philosophy about the perpetual survival of sentient beings. And I think that when we're talking about eternal life, in a fundamental sense, we're kind of talking about the same thing. Now, of course, a theist will put that eternal life after death, right? But the rest of us, we're seeking an eternal life before death, or just an eternal life, a real, actual eternal life. And I think that obviously, science is not there yet by any stretch of the imagination. But what we're doing is working towards a state where life is perpetually going on, where there's no threat to our survival, either immediate as individual life forms or as a society, as a species of any kind, and the picture of that world, what it would look like, isn't too dissimilar from a quote unquote heaven, a utopia, whatever. I think that we're all kind of looking for the same thing. I think that Christians have just given up hope in ever getting it while they're alive.
Yeah, I think some Christians have given up that hope. I look at one of the other reasons, I'll just bring up why I came back to Catholicism, is because all of the Marian apparitions. I myself had a Marian apparition when I was in college. I never left Mother Mary. I never stopped revering her. I just put her within whatever my belief system was, but that was the way I felt. But she also appeared to people like Bernadette at Lourdes, and there's a really good movie on that that's people made decades ago. But there's a really good movie where she appeared to her and she said, you're going to suffer in this life, and a lot of your suffering is going to go towards other people's souls, towards helping other people's souls, the prayers and everything that you put forth in them, but you're going to have eternal bliss. And kind of like the thief on the cross, some people wouldn't like that. The thief lived a terrible life, but at the end he repented, and suddenly Jesus said, this day you'll be with me in paradise. And some people, oh my gosh, that's crazy. But that's the idea, is there is a much better existence. This existence, I don't even know. Would you really want to live 300 years in this existence?
Something like that. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I definitely would not want to exist in any manner, shape, or form forever. There's only a finite number of particles in existence. There's only a finite number of things you can possibly do or understand. So eternity exceeds all of that. So at some point, even if it's trillions of years in the future, I'm going to get bored with existing and want to be just out. But I think, 300, 1,000, whatever, that sounds good. Yeah.
No, that's interesting. And so I'm going to have to watch whose channel are you going on for transhumanism?
Oh, that's going to be on Tang. I should just put that in
the Atheist Network group or something. Is that what that's short for?
Yeah, I believe so. I believe some of them are in the chat right now. Shout out to you guys, Tang. I think I did see Jenna was in the chat, and I think Ox usually pops in. So
I saw Ox in here.
They'll correct me if I am giving the wrong acronym, I'm sure. But yeah, shout out to you guys. Shout out to everybody in the chat, by the way. Brenda, nice to see you. Jen with one N, nice to see you. Thank you so much for your help in preparing for this conversation. She sent me some videos to check out. Gigi, shout out to you. Yeah, I think everybody else. Maya, good to see you too. Great to see you. Titan Uranus. Best name on YouTube. Okay. Shout out to everybody. Thank you guys for coming. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I accidentally said Titan's name one time. It's like I said it and I looked at it and I thought, oh, I did not just say that. It's gonna get
my favorite thing to say. But yeah, so when it comes to getting values, we usually derive those from other concepts on the tree. It's humanism, transhumanism. Some people love veganism. There's all these different other isms that we can derive. One of the things I was reading about humanism, they say that's not actually an ism because it's not really a coherent body. But I don't know if that's true. I have not read any of the manuscripts. I'm just focused on perpetual survival. That's my value proposition. And I even have, like this whole argument that I'm working on where I think I can derive entire morality from it. So that's what I'm working on.
No, that's really interesting. And so, I mean, I've done arguments before on morality and where we get our moral sense from, and how, because we all do share this moral sense for justice and purpose and meaning, it suggests that there is a divine, transcendent moral lawgiver. And so that's all I want to say, who does embody those particular characteristics. And so
I would say, like, the basic value proposition for all theism is basically, if I subscribe to this belief or worship this God, either way you want to phrase it, right? If I worship this God, I will obtain perpetual survival.
That is that's absolutely a value proposition in a paradise. And so it's interesting because I have looked into, because when I was in my 30s, I looked into a lot of Eastern beliefs because I was curious to see what they believe. And Buddhism and Hinduism kind of have this reincarnation idea, some forms, some sects of Buddhism and some sects of Hinduism. There's some Buddhists who are also atheists, but certain denominations of those faiths also believe that when you die, you're going to come back maybe in a higher caste if you're in Hinduism, or you're going to come back into an alternative life form, possibly. Like if you lived a terrible life, you might come back as a cow or something like that. And so it's interesting. There's a divine sense of justice to them, but it's more of it's not a personal divine sense of justice. It's more like an impersonal sense of justice. So you kind of wake up in this new body and you might be surprised, but you don't remember your other body and your other life. And so I just, it's interesting looking around the world and finding what everybody believes.
Yeah, definitely. It's very interesting. I think I'm not sure if you were just talking about it, but this idea of recurrence where, you just time loop your lifetime over and over again, maybe making changes if you can. I think
Yeah,
that
that's
those are
kind of what they
attractive.
believe. That's what some believe. It's like a recycling.
Right. Yeah. I think that's an attractive idea. I have no reason, no evidence to actually think that is the case, like, panspermia or some other pseudo scientific idea where it's just, maybe not. I don't know. So I think that if that's the value proposition, then what we're looking at is that atheists kind of have the same value propositions, right? We want to perpetuate life, usually, that's definitely a part of humanism, though it's more specific to human life. We want to make it, more well-being. Those things perpetuate life. They make it better and longer and happier, and all those things it's pushing it forward in a good way, so to speak, right? So I don't think that we're really talking about too much of a different thing. The question is, though, is the afterlife version of this perpetual survival at all possible, plausible, or even something that you could think is something that you could happen? And I don't think that the afterlife is real. I have no evidence of souls or spirits or anything like that. I talk to people, they all tell me they've seen ghosts or whatever, but when I come into the room, they just run away. I don't know. So yeah, I don't have any epistemological basis for thinking that there's an afterlife to yearn for. And I don't really see the attraction of it. Honestly, I'm perfectly happy with living this life.
Well, let me ask you that, because speaking of this idea of spirit, because I have had spiritual experiences before, and I have had evidence to suggest there's definitely a spiritual battle going on here, which I probably don't want to get into maybe, but I have had that evidence. And so I'm just wondering, and I've talked to a lot of people, even atheists, who say, oh yeah, like this one person I talked to, he said, oh yeah, one time I was going down, he was walking into some kind of dangerous area, and he had this serious sense that something was telling him, do not go down that road. And he ignored it, and he went down the road anyway, and he ended up getting beat up. And then there was another person who had this very significant sense that she should get off the road. She was driving, she'd get off the road. And it was like somebody was telling her, and whatever she did, I guess it saved her saved her life, because there was some major auto accident that happened right after that. And so I'm wondering, have you had any spiritual experiences where you kind of felt like there's something beyond the physical explanation?
I mean, when I was a Christian, I would interpret my experiences in that kind of way. But I understand now that I'm just an observer of the reality around me, and I'm taking in patterns that I see. And from those patterns, I'm making inferences in order to try to perpetuate my survival. So when I see things happening around me that increase the probability of danger, that's going to affect me. And if I'm not consciously aware of it, that's possible too. It's also possible that I'm just subconsciously taking in all these calculations, and they're adding up subtly to this probability that something bad is going to happen. And I think I'm better at that than, let's say, average, right? When it comes to predicting the future. And I have a very vivid imagination. I can imagine. So if I see a friend of mine engaging in some kind of let's say that they're cheating on their spouse or their girlfriend, right? And I know about this, my friend, right? I'm going to imagine the scene that's going to play out when that as a result of that action. And then when it actually does play out, because it has increased the probability of it happening, then I can, come back and say, oh, I saw it, like a vision. But it wasn't really a vision. That was my imagination creating this scene in my head. And I think that's what's happening with most people. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think you do try to find a natural explanation for different things that happen. I think that's fair. I think that's usually the first explanation, is the natural explanation. If you can't exhaust a natural, like I've been listening to exorcists on channels, like for example on Cameron Bertuzzi's channel, they had an exorcist, and there was one on Matt Fradd's channel, and I've heard another guy called Father Ripperger, and he gives all these stories, and he says that these people who are possessed, you're either possessed, oppressed, or the demons aren't bothering you or whatever. But he says there's a very, very tiny percentage of people who are possessed. It's something like 0.5% of all these cases that they see of people thinking that there's something wrong with them, and maybe they are. And so they exhaust every single natural explanation they can possibly exhaust before they get to, okay, well, maybe something else is going on. And then they report some of these crazy things that they see that suggest to me pretty strongly that there is something going on, like when their eyeballs suddenly turn green and then turn back to their normal color, or they're able to lift extremely strong weights that somebody of that size could never lift on her own or his own. And so there's little things like that I think if you look at it as honestly as you can and say even some of the encounters that people have with aliens, you've seen some of the claims that people have with aliens. Hugh Ross and Fuzz Rana have been on my channel, and what's the other guy's name? I forget. Ken Samples. They've been on my channel talking about that there's this potential that some of these alien abductions and things that people claim, in some cases, they could actually be demons or part of a spiritual world. And some of the harmful things that have happened to some of these people could be what they called residual UFOs. And so there's some interesting stuff out there. I wouldn't want to definitely say, oh, yes, this is absolutely the case. But I think it's nice to keep an open mind and say, well, maybe there's a possibility that there is something else going on.
Yeah, I mean, I fully accept that there's a possibility. But I mean, the term possible is very... it's not powerful, you know. There anything that I use the word possible in the logical sense that anything that is possible is something that's not logically ruled out. You know, it's not contradicting logically. So anything can be possible, but not necessarily plausible, not necessarily, and definitely not necessarily real. You know, I think that it is possible that those things are happening, but you know, when I have no epistemological basis to really see that it's plausible, then I can't even say that it's possible at all, because I don't even have that possibility in my life experience, you know. Mm-hmm. As far as the supernatural things, there's a lot of psychosomatics going on there, I think, as far as you know, mind over matter type of issues, where, you know, you've heard of the mother who sees their daughter or their child trapped under a vehicle and suddenly has superhuman strength and can lift it, right? We know that the effects of adrenaline can have on the body to do amazing superheroic type things. And given a certain set of beliefs about a situation and stress and whatever else might be involved, like an exorcism, I can see how the body might be able to do some things on the limits of human ability, but not necessarily going beyond that, right? I looked into levitation as far as the Catholic Church is concerned. This is interesting, right? Levitation is not actually levitation. It's really just the middle of your body making a hill. Like you still have a 3-point contact with whatever's on the ground, and they'll call it levitation. It's not really that. And I'm just like blown my mind that people can actually call this, like, I can do that, you know, without I can
isn't
levitate.
Isn't it when your feet are lifted off the ground and you're just standing like maybe this much over the ground?
You've seen it in every horror movie, in every single one that isn't when they're flying, when they just arch their back really high up in the air. That's considered levitating.
Yeah, I've seen it. I mean, I actually haven't seen it. I really don't watch horror movies. I watched a couple when I was a little kid, and I decided I don't like watching those movies. They scare me. But my understanding, because I've seen David Blaine, you know, he's a magician. He's able to somehow get himself lifted up off the ground, and I always wonder, now, how did David Blaine do that? Because he's standing, like, you see that, and I figure there's some trick going on that I don't know what it is, but he's somehow standing like this far. Like his legs, everything, his body is like off the ground. It's crazy.
I don't know if it's David Blaine, but there are definitely magicians who have done those whole How It's Done series. You can watch like almost any tricks and how it's done. And it's very interesting. And that's also a little depressing when it comes to having a theological background, because you can see how a magician can pull off these magical feats, quote unquote, in front of people. It really takes away the power of any kind of miracle reports that you've ever heard of. Because obviously, I mean, it's even in the Bible, in the story of Moses, where Moses is doing those feats in front of Pharaoh, and the Egyptian priests, they brought their staffs, they turned it into a snake, and then his snake ate theirs, of course. But you know, they reproduced his magic, so to speak, right? Which tells you that either they're both accessing the same source of quote unquote power, or they're both doing the same kind of trickery.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I have some of the miracles as far as that kind of thing. There are books, like I've listened to, I haven't seen or read his book, but Craig Keener has documented a number of miracles. There are apparently 7,000 people who've made claims that a miracle has occurred health-wise for them at Lourdes in France, at the scene of where Mother Mary appeared, but they've only approved 70 of them because they're extremely strict on exactly how they approve these miracles and whether they approve these miracles. And then I've talked to a woman on my channel who is literally on her deathbed at hospice when all of a sudden she got a second wind, and she had this very serious feeling from Jesus that she was going to be cured, and she actually left hospice, which is really unheard of with crazy disease. And so stuff like that, I say you could say it's all in the mind or something like that. And I know that in some cases maybe it would be, but I think it's nice to at least keep an open mind and look at those situations and try to figure out, well, what could this be? Is there a natural explanation, or is there not?
Well, I know that I used to be a scheduler for a hospice. So I know that there are people that, go on hospice. They get convinced by whatever situation. I'm not even going to go into that, but they become convinced that they have to, that they feel better and that everything's going to be okay. So they come off a hospice. And sometimes they are right. Sometimes it's a misdiagnosis. Sometimes things just aren't as bleak as it seems, because hospice isn't like a medical condition. It's just a doctor's assessment of you that says that you have about 6 months to live or so. And that can be wrong, obviously. And, a second wind, if you get a surge of hope and, like I said, psychosomatic interworkings of your body can make you feel like you're going to be just fine. And, if there was perchance a misdiagnosis or some other situation like that, then of course they're going to feel justified in that choice. And the hits will be counted and the misses won't. Right. But, for the vast majority of people on hospice, the fact that you have a second wind, that you feel better today, probably isn't a good reason to jump off a hospice quite just yet. But, everybody has the right to make their own medical decisions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. If you want to, I see Brenda saying that I was lying about that. So if you want to see the woman's testimony on my channel, her name is Susan Lambeau, and she came on my channel and she talked about it. So if I misquoted her or said something wrong that she didn't say, then go ahead and hit me for it. But I'm pretty sure I summed up her story from what she told me. So I'm just going with what this woman told me.
No problem. I try to make it a point to try to be as charitable as I can in these conversations. So I'm not going to accuse you of, lying or whatever, even if you are. Even if I really think that you are, I'm not going to say that, because what's the point of that? Nobody's going to be able to prove it. Might as well just, argue into the ether.
Yeah. No, I think that, it seems like you seem pretty fair, and you seem like you've got an open mind about a lot of things. And so I think that's good. And so and you say you've got a couple kids, so you're a dad, so that's always good too. So you're raising some kids and good values. And I like the part of the country that you're from. I won't mention where you are in case you don't want the audience to know, but you're from a pretty nice place. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I
Texas
posted on the YouTube channel once.
Texas is unique. It's almost like its own country. Like it's different than I think so many other states.
Right. Yeah, it's very different. It's a trip, honestly. But I'm not going to talk too much about Texas. You don't want to piss off Texans.
Yeah. So have you lived there your whole life?
No,
when you were in the military?
Ohio.
Oh, okay.
I'm from Ohio, but I was stationed here, and then I ended up growing some roots and some ties here. So now I'm here.
Yeah. What'd you think about that Ohio train wreck? Have you heard about that?
Well, it's awful. Obviously, I don't.
Yeah.
What is the thing? It's tragic.
Yeah. It's terrible. So no, I was just watching that, and I saw some people on TV, and they were just talking about how they didn't really have a place to go. They have houses there, and they've got this air, and their dogs are dying and throwing up, and the people are suffering. So it's just it's horrible. So I didn't know if you'd heard about that, because that's you said Ohio, so I just thought of that because it's in Ohio.
Yeah, I don't have any family in Palestine that I've heard anything from. I haven't had a chance to talk to my dad about anything yet today. So I'll probably touch base with him later to get some more details about whatever's actually going on down there. But he might not even know, because Palestine's pretty far away from where my family lives.
Yeah, I'm from Illinois originally. So I'm from cornfields, surrounded by cornfields, and then I moved down to Florida. So I like it way better down here.
If I had more time to prepare, I probably would have put a link in the chat for some kind of donation to send to people there. So maybe I'll do that later. And I also want to remind everybody who's watching that every all the revenue that Atheist Edge takes in this month of February is going to be going to that GoFundMe for my friend from the Army, the homeless veteran who is currently homeless and has stage 4 cancer. So
Oh, geez, that's horrible.
if you no, yeah, it is pretty bad. But we did a GoFundMe fundraiser show for him a couple days ago, and raised some money through super chats, which are going to come through soon to go to his GoFundMe. But we're going to just donate whatever comes in from YouTube. We're just going to send it straight over to the GoFundMe when it comes in. So if you like the video, if you share it, subscribe it, anything like that is going to help that GoFundMe, and that's a good cause too. And also in that last video, there's a link to a good charity to help out the people in Syria suffering from that earthquake. So let's all pull together and build some community out here, right?
Yeah. Has he heard from the TV? I keep seeing on TV like the Wounded Warriors and a lot of different things. Mark Wahlberg sometimes brings in some money for people like that. Has he reached out to any of those groups?
Yeah, he's involved in some groups in the VA. They're working on stuff. He's got a treatment plan coming up, and he has a real kicker. His girlfriend is pregnant right now. He has a child on the way as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I didn't want to talk about that too much, just because I didn't talk to him about it. I didn't think about it. Sorry. But yeah, so he's really going through it. I sent him a list of a bunch of VA things that I've used in the past when I was going through it. So I understand what he's going through, but it's hard. It's really hard. And the PTSD, it screws with your ability to act on things, right? To be able to improve yourself and to fix whatever is going on. It's like holding you down.
Yeah, my husband has a cousin who was a female who was just a little bit younger than he is, in her 40s, and she served in the military. She served in Afghanistan. She came home with PTSD, and she ended up dying last year of an overdose. And so I can't, pray for people like that enough. I know she was struggling big time when she came back.
Yeah, that's horrible. I'm so sorry to hear that. My thoughts go out to them and their family. Yeah. That's a very sad situation. Okay, well, do you want to wrap it up right now and kind of
yeah, well, I want to say, well, thank you for having me on your channel. I enjoyed it. I think we made a value proposition. I think I agree with you that atheism in itself doesn't really have a value proposition, obviously, with related to end of life, destiny, that kind of thing. But I think this idea that I never really have heard from anybody else is this transhumanist idea that you want to live a lot longer. I've never really heard anybody say you want to live on this earth, say 300 years or 1,000 years. That's new to me. So I'm gonna have to listen to that video.
Let me just say, that's not really what I want to try to convey. It's more about the perpetual survival of the entire species or the community, sentient beings in general. It's not really about necessarily extending the human life individually. But of course, when we do that, when we develop technologies that extend human life and well-being, then the perpetual survival of the entire species becomes more and more guaranteed, right? If we build let's say we build a planetary defense system that watches out for asteroids and meteors. Now, all of a sudden, that's a way to extinct humans that's off the table. And that's obviously a good thing, right? I think.
Yeah, well, I think it's funny that Elon Musk thinks he's going to build a little planetary, like he's going to somehow be able to transport us over to Mars. But anytime I've talked to people who are astronomers, they say there's no possible way we can break through that atmosphere and survive as humans in our current state. There's no way we can get through. So I don't know what he's going to do to be able to break through that barrier and get us over there. And I have no desire to go to Mars, actually. So I'm perfectly content on this planet. So it's just,
I don't have any desire to go to Mars either. I think that we need to turn this planet into a Dyson sphere of some kind. So that way, if and when the sun does go out in 1 billion or 5 billion years, we can just fly this planet somewhere else.
Interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it. So you kind of are. I mean, if you're kind of feeling like maybe your soul will be around in that 5 billion years at some point.
No, not like that. It's just the echoes of your actions, those persist for sure, right?
That's true. Like a ripple effect.
Yeah, I have kids, so my DNA might be around in 5 billion years. Maybe not.
That's true.
It's but I'm not worried about that. Obviously, when I die, I don't have to care anything more about anything else in this horrible world. So it's just about trying to do my part to make it better for the next generation, because obviously we're born into this world that's plagued with war, famine, racism, sexism, inequality, and just, just bad things all in general that could have, in my estimation, have been solved had we not been so distracted by fighting over which God was which and which afterlife you want.
Yeah, I mean, there have been religious fights for sure. I look at my Catholic background coming from the Irish roots where I come from, and the Irish Protestant battles, Catholic Protestant battles in Ireland certainly have been horrific over the centuries. And so I can certainly agree with that. There's also been some terrible things put on, unfortunately, by communist leaders that also have destroyed many people on the planet. And then we've got horrible people like Hitler. So obviously there is some horrible stuff, but I think we can also look at some of the joyful stuff and some of the happiness and some of the beauty in life. And I think going to a ski slope or going out and looking at the beach or going out and seeing some of the beauty in the world, I think to me that in itself, and this Fibonacci sequence, I think there's a lot of things that point to God's existence, but that's including the trees in my background. I know that atheists hate when I say that, but I purposely put these trees here because theists always say, look at the trees.
Look at the trees.
Atheists are like, that's not a good argument. I'm like,
argument.
no, seriously, look at the trees.
No, I mean, yeah, a ski slope, for instance, is a beautiful thing, right? But when you think about all the people that will never even see a ski slope, much less live to see the next meal, I mean, it kind of takes away the beauty of it, if a miracle happened to me, quote unquote, where something amazing, let's say $1 million showed up on my doorstep tomorrow, right? That would be, amazing for me. But, right now there's another child somewhere who's going to die of starvation, and there's nothing I can do about it. Even if I sent all my money away for it, it's just going to happen. I can't be impressed by anything beautiful or advantageous when there's so much disadvantage.
Yeah. And I mean, in the world that we live in, as far as we have to bear our own crosses, a lot of that makes sense in my Christian worldview. So that's all I can say on that. So I think the suffering here is temporary, and the punishment is temporal for the Christian view from the Catholic perspective with purgatory, and the eternity is bliss and paradise. And so I think that's something that makes a lot of sense. And so that's where we don't agree.
I don't know if I want to spark up another point of contention or just let it wrap up. What do you feel like doing right now?
I got a few minutes if you want to do a point of contention.
So you know what? No, I lost it actually. My brain is not working as good as I thought it was. Sorry.
Well, I do still want to say, now, where did you serve when you were in the military? Did you go to Afghanistan?
Iraq.
Oh gosh, Iraq. Yeah, both of them. That's I know you probably saw some brutal things. So again, I just say thank you for your service, and to all the service people who went with you. I can't give you guys enough credit. I mean, just it's the courage and the bravery that it takes to do that is something that we should all admire.
I really appreciate you saying that, and thank you for the support. And it's always awkward when people thank you for your service, because it's a complicated issue internally. But thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
So yeah, everybody, SJ is linked in the description below. I'm sure we're going to have another conversation soon. Have a little bit more of a focused debate maybe one day, I hope. But this was a good conversation. I feel like we got to discuss our ideas, and I think you have a better understanding of where I'm coming from as far as atheism goes. So I think this was a good conversation as far in general. Obviously, we don't agree with a lot of things, but maybe one day we will.
Agreed. Yeah, thank you so much.
No problem. So yeah, I just want to let you guys know that next week I'm going to have an actual debate between Nine Tails, Cosmic Fox, and Biblically. The exact time is still be determined, but that's going to be, I think, the 19th. Yeah, that's it for now. But I'll get more on the schedule soon. So thank you all for joining me. Thank you to the moderators in the chat. Thank you to everybody who showed up. Shout out to all of you. And remember, it's the bridges we build, not the bridges we burn, that give us the edge. Y'all have a great night.